The air on Park Avenue was still heavy. I squeezed Lily's little hand, more for my peace of mind than for hers. She skipped happily over the gray flagstones of the sidewalk, her little blue dress fluttering. Every Sunday was the same, a performance in the theater of appearances. My in-laws' apartment, a grand pre-war co-op with the scent of old money and pine sol. It was the stage. "Ready to see Grandma and Grandpa?" I asked, trying to force some joy into my voice. "Yay!" she answered with the blind faith of a 2-year-old. Ethan, my husband, was already inside. Got here early to help Dad with the new cable box he'd told me on the phone. An excuse. I knew his early arrival was a ritual, a moment alone with his parents before I, the intruder, appeared with the unpredictable element, our daughter. Claire opened the door. My sister-in-law. Her smile was a thin stroke of lipstick. Finally. "We were about to send out a search party," she said, not moving from the threshold. Her eyes scanned Lily from head to toe. Then me, Alara. "Those shoes are too small for her. You can see her toes pressing against the front." "They're not, she just likes them," I lied. They were her favorites with a little bow. I slipped past her, feeling her gaze fixed on the back of my neck. The living room was an altar to order. Everything gleamed, everything in its place. Meredith, my mother-in-law, approached for the 2 air kisses. Her lips brushed my cheek like sandpaper. "Ethan's with Arthur. Man stuff," she announced as if explaining a sacred mystery. Then she looked at Lily. "Watch her, Alara. Don't let her touch the Swarovski crystal. The last cleaning lady got them so shiny, but they're delicate." Arthur, from his throne, a leather armchair, barely lifted a hand in greeting. The television, a flat screen the size of a window, was broadcasting an NFL game. The volume was his fortress. It was then that Claire made her triumphant entrance. She led her 3-year-old daughter Sophia by the hand, dressed like a miniature duchess. "My little girl was student of the week," Claire declared, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "And as a reward, I got her this." From behind the sofa, she pulled out a large box with a picture of a dollhouse that looked like a mansion in the Hamptons. It wasn't a toy. It was a statement. Varnished wood miniature furniture that looked designer LED lights and obscenity. Sophia glanced at it with indifference. Lily, on the other hand, let go of my hand. Her eyes widened like saucers. "Ooh," she breathed, mesmerized. "Yes, it's beautiful, isn't it?" Sophia, Claire said to her daughter, ignoring mine. "It's only for very careful girls. For princesses." Lily, driven by an irrepressible wonder, reached out a finger. She just wanted to point at the tiny chimney. She wasn't going to touch it. Hey, Claire's shout was a whip crack. She grabbed Lily's rag doll, the one she slept with every night, and snatched it away. "Don't touch that. Don't you teach her anything, Alara. This is Sophia's." Lily froze. Her little face crumpled and she burst into a heart-wrenching sob. The kind that sounds like it's breaking their soul. I shot to my feet. "Claire, for God's sake," she was just looking at it. "Give her doll back. She needs to learn," she snapped, placing the doll on top of a high bookshelf like a trophy. "You ask for permission first." My daughter was crying, her arms outstretched toward her treasure. Meredith sighed, exasperated. "Please control your child. It's Sunday." Arthur turned up the volume on the TV. Ethan peeked his head out from the hallway, made an uncomfortable face, and disappeared. Containing my fury, I picked Lily up. I cradled her, whispering nonsense in her ear. Her sobs slowly subsided into hiccups, all for a gesture of curiosity, for existing. Dinner was an ordeal. Pot roast as heavy as the atmosphere. Claire talked about her husband Robert's business trips to Brussels. Arthur opined on politics. Ethan nodded. Meredith watched to make sure not a single crumb fell on the floor. I pushed food around my plate, not hungry. Lily in her high chair played silently with a spoon. After coffee, the men retreated to the study. Meredith and Claire began to clear the table. I offered to help. "No, you stay with the little one," Meredith said without looking at me. "We have enough of a mess to deal with." The mess was Lily, who was now quietly watching from the floor as Claire, with a ceremonious gesture, placed the dollhouse on the low coffee table in the living room. A place of honor. A beacon. "I'm going to the bathroom, sweetie," I said, stroking her hair. "Stay right here with Mommy for a minute." It was a lapse of seconds. Just enough time. The sound wasn't a scream. It was a short, sharp shriek that was cut off abruptly. Then a horrible silence. I knew. In my gut, I knew. I ran. The living room. The scene burned itself into my retinas. Lily was standing by the coffee table, the tip of one finger gently stroking the tiny roof of the dollhouse. Claire was beside her, I hadn't seen her come in. In my sister-in-law's hand gleamed the silver Italian stovetop espresso maker, the old one only used for important guests. Steam was rising from its spout. Claire didn't look angry. Her face was concentrated, serene. She looked at Lily, looked at the pot, and then with a deliberate, almost elegant movement, she tilted her arm. A stream of dark steaming liquid shot from the spout. It wasn't a splash. It was a direct, aimed flow that fell across my daughter's entire face. The sound that followed was a choked gasp, a noise of suffocation. Lily didn't scream. She collapsed backward like a rag doll. Her little hands flew to her face. No. My voice was alien. An animalistic roar. Claire set the espresso maker down on the table. It made a dull thud. It slipped, she said, looking at Meredith and Arthur, who were appearing in the doorway. Her voice was flat, firm. The child pushed me. She wanted the toy. It was an accident. Liar. You did it, I saw you. I screamed, kneeling beside Lily. I didn't dare touch her face. Her skin, her beautiful skin, was red, an intense, violent red. On her left cheek near her eye, white bubbles were already rising, blisters forming before my eyes. The smell of burnt coffee and flesh turned my stomach. Lily, my love, Mommy's here, I babbled, not knowing what to do. Panic was closing my throat. Ethan appeared behind his parents. Pale. What happened? He asked, stunned. Call an ambulance, I shrieked at him. Arthur stepped forward. He didn't look at his granddaughter. He looked at me. His eyes, small and hard, gleamed with fury. What have you taught this creature? He growled. She respects nothing. She can't stop touching what isn't hers. Look at the scare she gave your sister-in-law. I couldn't believe it. Meredith nodded, crossing her arms. Always the same, Alara, so laid back. You let her do whatever she wants. Now look at the accident she's caused. Accident. The word sounded false, obscene. Claire was wiping her hands on her apron. Her mouth was a tight line, but in her eyes there was something. Not fear. Satisfaction. The pot was very hot, she repeated, her gaze fixed on me. For the after-dinner coffee, it slipped. She pushed me. You're a liar, I roared, carefully picking Lily up. She whimpered, a weak, heart-wrenching sound. Her little body trembled against mine. Enough. Arthur's voice boomed, silencing everything. He planted himself in front of me. His breath smelled of scotch. Always with the drama. Your daughter misbehaves, there's a mishap, and you insult my family. This is over. Get out, what I whispered, breathless. You heard him, Meredith shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the door. You come here. You disturb the peace of this house, and on top of it all, you make accusations. Out of my house. Take your daughter and don't come back. I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the floor. His hands hung limply at his sides. He said nothing. He did nothing. In that instant, he disappeared. He ceased to be my husband. He became just another spectator. An absolute coldness washed over me. The fear froze. I clutched Lily, careful not to touch her injured face. I pressed her against my chest. She hid her face in my neck, her breath ragged. Come on, Lily, I whispered. I turned around. Walking toward the door, I felt my in-laws' gazes heavy with hatred. On my back, I heard Claire say something to Sophia in a sweet voice. Don't worry, honey. They're leaving now. The front door was heavy. I opened it with my shoulder. The cool air of the hallway hit me. Lily was shivering. Before the door closed, I heard Arthur's voice, clear and contemptuous, directed at his son. And you, Ethan, it's about time you put some order in your house. The final slam of the door echoed in the stairwell like a gunshot. Outside on Park Avenue, the afternoon was sunny and cold. People were strolling, life went on. I held my scalded daughter in my arms. I took out my phone. My fingers didn't tremble. They were stone still. I dialed my father's number. Dad, I said, my voice sounding strangely calm, metallic. Come to Lenox Hill Hospital. Now. It's Lily. I paused, looking up at the windows of the grand apartment. And tomorrow, Dad, tomorrow we sever everything. Everything that connects us to these people. Do you hear me? Everything. The fluorescent light in the hospital flickered a spasmodic rhythm that drilled into my eyes. It smelled of disinfectant and fear. In my arms, Lily barely whimpered, a low, constant sound like a wounded little animal. The skin on her left cheek, now covered with a damp gauze, a nurse with a pitying face had given me, seemed to pulse beneath my fingers. The doctor will be right with you, the receptionist had said without looking up from her computer. That was 20 minutes ago, or maybe an hour. Time had dissolved. There was only the weight of Lily, her feverish warmth, and the image burned into my mind, the espresso pot tilting the dark stream, Claire's serene expression. The emergency room door swung open. Ethan walked in. He was wearing the same jacket he'd had on at his parents' house. His face didn't show concern. It showed contained anger, his lips a tight white line. "Alara," he said my name like an accusation. "Where were you?" I asked, not recognizing my own voice. It was hoarse-worn. "Cleaning up the mess you made," he spat, approaching. He didn't look at Lily. He looked at me. "What the hell did you do? What did you say to Claire to make her get like that?" The air left my lungs. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. "Me? What did I say, Ethan?" She poured boiling coffee on our daughter. "I saw it. Claire says it was an accident," he cut in sharp. "She says Lily lunged at Sophia to take the toy that she pushed her, and the pot fell out of her hands." "Why was the pot so hot, Ethan, huh?" "Because she's a psychopath," I whispered, hugging Lily tighter. She flinched. "And you know it. You've always known it. Don't start with your drama," he raised his voice. A passing nurse shot us a warning look. He lowered his tone, but the rage was still there, simmering. "My sister isn't like that. You've never made the slightest effort to fit in. You criticize my parents, you despise their traditions, and now you've poisoned my daughter against them. Look where we are because of you." Every word was a nail. I looked at this man, the father of my child, the one who shared my bed, and I saw only a stranger who had chosen his side in his parents' living room while his daughter burned. "Your fault," I said, the coldness in my voice surprising even me as not having stopped this years ago. "Your fault is letting your sister poison everything. And your fault is being here now defending her and not her." I pointed at Lily. Finally, Ethan looked at his daughter. His gaze rested on the gauze on the small, trembling shoulder. A flicker of something doubt pain crossed his eyes, but it was fleeting, suffocated by the toxic loyalty that strangled him. "She'll be fine. They're just superficial burns," he muttered, as if trying to convince himself. "Superficial." A deep voice loaded with a glacial fury rumbled behind us. My father Mike was there. He was still in his work clothes, as if he'd rushed straight from the construction site. Beside him, a younger man in a serious suit held a briefcase. David, the family lawyer. Their presence suddenly filled the cold hallway. "Mike," Ethan said, startled. Then with a hint of disdain, "This is a family matter. You shouldn't. My granddaughter getting scalded by some witch is my business." My father cut him off. He came over to me. His eyes, hard as steel, softened for an instant as they fell on Lily. "How is she, honey?" "It hurts," I managed to say. It was all I could articulate. Mike nodded, his jaw tight. Then he turned to Ethan. The transformation was terrifying. His body, broad and strong, seemed to grow. "Tell me one thing, Ethan. Just one. Did you see what happened?" Ethan swallowed. "Claire said it was an accident. The kid pushed her." "I didn't ask you what that harpy said," my father roared, his voice echoing down the hall. Several heads turned. "I asked you if you saw it. Were you in the room?" "No, but then shut your mouth." Mike took a step forward. David, the lawyer, put a cautionary hand on his arm, but he shook it off. "For years, I've watched that woman, your sister, poison your family against my daughter. I've seen it at every Christmas, every dinner. And you, a grown man, you've played blind. But this," he gestured to Lily with a nod, "this is the last straw. This is a crime." "It was an accident," Ethan insisted, but his voice had no force left. It sounded like a broken record. "An accident," David intervened with a professional calm that contrasted with the tension in the air. He opened his briefcase and took out a legal pad. "Mr. Hayes, allow me to inform you. Pouring a boiling liquid onto a minor, whether or not there was prior intent to cause harm, can constitute at a minimum a felony charge of reckless endangerment. Depending on the medical evaluation, we could be talking about more. Intent, of course, is harder to prove, unless there are witnesses." He let the last phrase hang in the air, looking pointedly at Ethan. "Are you threatening me?" Ethan sputtered, turning the anger he didn't dare direct at my father toward David. "I'm informing you," David corrected him smoothly. "Your daughter has been injured. Your wife is an eyewitness to events that contradict your sister's version. You are not. It would be prudent for you to reflect on where you want to stand when the police take statements." "The police," Ethan murmured, turning pale. For the first time, something like fear appeared in his eyes. It wasn't fear for Lily. It was fear of the consequences of the scandal. Just then, the door to the examination room opened. A young woman in a white coat came out, her hair in a severe bun. She wore glasses that made her face look smaller. Her eyes, however, were sharp and tired. "Family of Lily Hayes?" she asked. "Yes, Ethan," and I said in unison, stepping forward. The doctor looked at us both, then fixed her attention on me holding the child. "I'm Dr. Ruiz. Bring her in, please." We followed her into a small white room. Ethan lingered near the door like an outsider. I laid Lily on the examination table. She whimpered, scared. The doctor put on gloves and with a delicacy that contrasted with her stern expression, began to remove the gauze. I held my breath. Underneath the skin was raw, shiny, a large area from her temple to her chin crossing her cheekbone. In the center, near her lower eyelid, was a darker area where the blisters had broken, leaving a wet red surface. It was worse than I remembered. The doctor examined it in silence, gently palpating the edges. She applied a cool ointment that made Lily flinch. Then she looked at me. "It's a second-degree thermal burn, a deep one. The liquid's temperature was very high. Luckily, the contact time was brief. Otherwise, we'd be talking about third degree and surgery." And the scar?" I asked, a knot in my throat. The doctor sighed. It was the sigh of someone who had delivered this news too many times. "There will be a mark. On a child this young with such delicate skin and on the face. Yes, there will be a scar. With time, with the right treatments, it can be greatly diminished, but it won't disappear completely." The world tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. A mark on her little face. Forever. A physical reminder, every single day, of what had happened. Of Claire's malice, of Ethan's cowardice, of my failure to protect her. "Do you understand?" the doctor asked, looking me in the eye. I nodded, unable to speak. "We're going to give her something for the pain and an antibiotic ointment. You need to apply it 3 times a day. And watch for fever. She'll need regular follow-ups with a pediatric plastic surgeon." "Thank you," I murmured. Ethan from the doorway had listened in silence. His face was stone. "A scar. Forever." "Yes, sir," the doctor confirmed, addressing him with professional coldness. "Forever." My father, who had been following the conversation from outside, entered the room. His gaze, fixed on Ethan, could have melted steel. "You hear that?" he said, each word laced with venom. "Your daughter will carry your sister's signature on her face every day of her life. Are you still going to call it an accident, Ethan?" Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish out of water. The cold medical reality was finally seeping through his armor of denial. It was then that Mike straightened up. He wasn't addressing me or Ethan. He spoke to the room, to the doctor, to the world. "Listen to me, everyone," he said, and his voice wasn't a shout. It was a firm, clear declaration carved from granite. "As of this moment, Mike Collins and my entire family are breaking any and all ties, any relationship, any contact with the family of Ethan Hayes. I don't want to see them, I don't want to hear from them, and they are to never, ever come near my daughter or my granddaughter again. What happened today was not an accident. It was an assault. And anyone who protects the perpetrator is as guilty as the one who committed it." He looked directly at Ethan. "You choose. But you already chose, didn't you, when you stayed there, cleaning up the mess? You already chose." Ethan turned even paler, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked at Lily on the table with her bandaged cheek. Then he looked at me. In his eyes, I saw many things: rage, frustration, fear, but I didn't see remorse. I didn't see love. This is insane," he stammered. "You're destroying the family." "You already destroyed it," I spat, finally finding my voice. "When you let them burn your daughter's face. That was the last straw." With a guttural sound of rage, Ethan spun on his heel. He didn't say another word. He didn't look back. He yanked the door open and stormed into the hallway. His fast, furious footsteps echoed until they faded away. The slam of the door at the end of the hall sounded like the closing of a tomb. The smell of lemon and lavender in my parents' house was a balm that couldn't reach the place where I was anchored in an internal cold that not even the blanket my mother Helen had draped over my shoulders could dispel. Lily was finally asleep thanks to a mild painkiller in my old bed. Through the slightly ajar door, I could see her tiny back rising and falling. The white gauze on her cheek was an unbearable stain. "You have to eat something, honey," my mother said, placing a steaming mug of tea in front of me. Her hands veined and trembling slightly, not from age but from contained rage. "I'm not hungry, Mom." It's not a suggestion, she replied, with that firm gentleness that had raised me. She sat across from me. Her hazel eyes reflected my pain doubled. Mike went with David the lawyer. They're preparing things. But right now, I need you to talk to me. I need to understand how it gets to that point. I looked at the mug. The steam curled upward, ephemeral as normalcy. It wasn't a fit of rage, I said, my voice hollow distant. She didn't scream. She didn't seem out of control. She did it calmly, like she was watering a plant. My mother made a quick, instinctive sign of the cross. My God. And them, Arthur and Meredith, I swallowed a bitter taste. They threw her out. Us. Like we were dogs with mange. And Ethan. Ethan stayed behind cleaning. My husband's name fell between us like a tombstone. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was Ethan, the man who chose to stay. I always knew that woman had something broken inside her, Helen murmured, looking out the window at her small garden. But this is pure evil. It's not just jealousy. Mom, I said, bringing to light something I had held in for years, a poison I could now name. It's deeper. It's hatred for me for taking him away, and for Lily for being his daughter. Taking who away? Ethan. Her little brother. The prince, the male heir. The pieces were starting to fit, forming a nauseating picture. You didn't know them then, but Dad did. Arthur always looked down on Claire. He wanted a son for the construction business. When Ethan was born, it was like the sun rose just for him. Claire was a smart girl, yes, but a girl. I've seen it for years. Every one of Ethan's accomplishments was celebrated. Every one of Claire's was an about time, or a, but what about a boyfriend? She adored him and hated him at the same time. And I was the one who took the family idol. And to top it off, I gave him a granddaughter, another woman to look down on. My mother nodded slowly. And the child, Lily, was a representative of everything she never had. Unconditional love. And the toy I added, seeing the obscene dollhouse again in my mind. It wasn't for Sophia. It was for her, a reminder that she could give her daughter what was denied to her. And Lily dared to touch it, to mar her trophy. A shiver ran down my spine. It hadn't been a punishment for touching. It had been an execution for daring. The doorbell rang abruptly. My mother got up. It was Chloe, my cousin! She burst in like a storm in her jeans, boots, and her final-year law student backpack. Her hug was tight, almost painful. I heard from Grandpa, she said without letting go. Her usually bright eyes were serious. That daughter of a... She caught herself. Sorry, Aunt Helen. Sit down, honey. Helen sighed. Want some tea? I want to know what we're going to do, Chloe said, dropping her backpack on the floor. She sat next to me, taking my hand. Her fingers were warm. David, the lawyer, is already getting the hospital records. But we need more. Alara, you have to tell me everything. Every detail. I told her again. Every word was like peeling off a scab. When I got to the part about the espresso pot, about Claire's expression, Chloe squeezed my hand hard. That cold, witch, she muttered. Then she bit her lip, thinking, hey, what if this isn't the first time? What do you mean? Chloe looked at my mother, then at me. She lowered her voice. This is going to sound crazy, but years ago, when I was in college, a friend of mine in psychology roomed with a girl who went to the same private university as Claire. A real preppy type. She told me that this girl, Claire, had a boyfriend in her freshman year. An artsy guy, totally not from her world. Her parents, especially her father, despised him. It ended badly. Very badly. How badly? I asked, a new knot forming in my stomach. The girl said that when the guy tried to break up with her, Claire cornered him in the university parking garage. She had a thermos in her hand. She told him that if he didn't get back with her, she'd throw car battery acid in his face. Chloe paused, letting the words sink in. The guy, terrified, reported it. But Claire's parents pulled strings. A lot of strings. They fixed it all, money threats, who knows. The report vanished, and Claire was convinced to switch her major to business and stop embarrassing the family. The silence that followed was thick. My mother had her hand over her mouth. All I could think of was the steaming liquid pouring onto my daughter's face. It wasn't coffee. It could have been acid. The same coldness, the same intent to mark, to damage, to possess. And that guy, I asked, my voice hoarse. He transferred. Left the city. My friend lost track of him. But I remember the name. Daniel Mena. I could try to find him. If he was willing to file a report, then maybe now with this, it could be character testimony. It shows what she's capable of, my mother concluded, her voice trembling. It's just a rumor from years ago. Alara Chloe warned, seeing the hope light up in my eyes. Hard to prove, but it's a thread. And right now we need every thread we can get. My phone, which was on silent on the table, buzzed. A message. A blocked number. I opened it. No text, just a photo. A close-up of the dollhouse, intact, gleaming, placed back in the center of my in-laws' coffee table. The afternoon sun made the tiny windows shine. It was a picture of absolute normalcy. Of victory. Beneath the photo, a second message arrived a few seconds later. Just 4 words. She had it coming. The blood froze in my veins. I showed the screen to Chloe and my mother. The color drained from Helen's face. "Who is it, Claire?" Chloe said, taking the phone. "It has to be." "I don't know. Blocked number. It could be her. It could be any of them." I looked at my mother. "I have to call the police. Now. This is harassment. It's a threat." "Yes. Call my," mother said firmly. "And save that. Every piece of evidence." With trembling hands, I dialed 911. I explained as concisely as I could what had happened at dinner, the burn, and now the anonymous message. The operator on the other end took notes with a professional but distant voice. She said they would send a patrol car to take a statement, but that for a single message without an explicit threat, options were limited. She advised me to block the number and save the evidence. I hung up, feeling more vulnerable than before. "It's useless," I murmured, disheartened. "No, it's not," Chloe corrected. "It creates a precedent. A history. Now, Alara. Let's get back to our plan." Our plan? What was that revenge justice? I just felt an infinite exhaustion. I needed a bath. I needed to sleep. I needed my daughter not to be in pain. "I'm going to check if the online banking is working," I said, more to do something than for any real reason. I had tried to pay for gas with the debit card a few days earlier, and it had been declined. I thought it was a fluke. I opened the app on my phone. I entered my login details. I went into the joint account, the one Ethan and I used for household expenses, the mortgage, the daycare. The screen loaded and then went blank. No, not blank. It showed the balance. $0. I blinked. I refreshed. Nothing. 0. "What's wrong?" Chloe asked, alerted by my expression. "The account?" I stammered. "It's empty." "Empty? What do you mean empty?" My mother came closer. 0. Habiwana mago. And ac. And ac. And. And ac. And. And ac. And. 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 And in the transaction history. The last few days showed normal withdrawals, the grocery store, the gas station, and the Nasingla transaction made yesterday afternoon. A transfer for the entire balance 18650 to another account. An account I didn't recognize but whose holder was listed with the initials E.A.H. Ethan Arthur Hayes. He had emptied it. The day after his sister burned our daughter's face, he had gone to the bank or logged online and moved every last cent to his personal account. Our security, the money for the mortgage, for daycare, for Lily's treatments. It was gone. A strange sound escaped my throat. Not a sob. It was a dry, desperate laugh. "He took the money," I said, looking at my mother and Chloe. "All of it. There's nothing left." Helen closed her eyes as if taking a physical blow. Chloe cursed under her breath with impressive creativity. "It's to leave you without resources," she finally said, with analytical coldness. "To make you dependent on him, or to make you give up. It's a dirty, dirty tactic." I stared at the screen. The 2 zeros seemed to mock me. Then I looked toward the room where my daughter slept with her bandaged face. The rage, that cold rage that had started to form in the hospital, solidified. It transformed into something hard, sharp, determined. I was no longer scared. I was no longer hurt. I was at war. I picked up the phone. Not to call the police. I dialed my father's number. "Dad," I said, and my voice no longer trembled. It was flat, firm. "Ethan emptied the joint account. Everything. I need David to start the separation proceedings immediately on top of everything else. And I need to find a job. The call came at 7 a.m. An insistent ringing that pierced the restless sleep I'd been tossing in. I reached for the phone, my vision blurry. It was a blocked number, the usual lately. "Hello," I murmured, my voice thick. "Alara." It was Ethan's voice, flat, emotionless, like he was talking to a telemarketer. My mother died. The sleep vanished instantly. I sat up in bed. Beside me, Lily was sleeping soundly, her bandaged cheek barely visible on the pillow. What Meredith when last night? A massive heart attack. In her bedroom. He paused. I could hear his breathing, controlled, measured. The funeral is today at 5. At Street Ignatius. He didn't say, "You should come." He didn't say, "For Lily's sake." He just dropped the information like someone handling an administrative task. "Ethan, I'm sorry," I managed to say, though the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. I didn't feel grief. I felt a strange emptiness punctuated by a petty, guilty relief. She couldn't yell at me anymore. She couldn't look at her granddaughter with contempt. "Yeah." Another pause. Then, in a tone tinged with the first real emotion accusation, he said, "The doctor said extreme stress could have triggered it. The shock." From last week? There it was. He didn't say it, but it floated in the silence between Manhattan and my town. "It was your fault. Lily's fault. Your drama's fault." "Don't say that to me," I cut in coldly. "I'm just telling you what the doctor said." His voice regained its sterile quality. 5 o'clock. Street Ignatius. He hung up. I sat on the bed, phone in hand, watching my daughter sleep. The news didn't sadden me. It terrified me for what it meant, for what was coming. When I told my parents in the kitchen as coffee steamed in our mugs, my father's reaction was instant. "You're not going." "I have to go, Dad." "For what? So those people can spit in your face?" Mike slammed his fist on the table. "That woman threw you out of her house while your daughter was burned. And now you want to go mourn her." "I'm not going to mourn her," I said, calmer than I felt. "I'm going to be seen, so they know I'm not hiding. If I don't go, Claire will say I stayed away out of guilt, that I killed her. She's already implying it." "Your cousin's right, my mother," Helen said, drying her hands on her apron. Her face was pale but resolute. "If you don't go, she wins. She controls the narrative. But don't go alone, honey. We'll go with you." I shook my head. "No. This is mine to do. You two stay with Lily. I don't want them to see her. I don't want them to touch her." In the end, it was Chloe who decided to come with me. "I'm a lawyer in training," she said with a wry smile. "Or at least I look the part. And I am dying to see this circus." Street Ignatius Church was packed. It smelled of wax, wilting flowers, and expensive perfume. The dark wood casket rested before the altar draped in a blanket of white roses. Too white, too pure. Claire was in the front pew in severe black, a veil barely hiding her puffy, pale face. She was weeping elegantly, a lace handkerchief pressed to her eyes. Sophia beside her, dressed like a mourning doll, looked around bored. Ethan was on the other side, upright, stoic, his gaze fixed on the crucifix. He wasn't crying. Arthur, my ex-father-in-law, seemed to have aged 20 years. He was slumped in the pew as if the weight of his own body was unbearable. I felt all eyes on me when I walked in with Chloe on my arm. Whispers, averted gazes, a murmur that rippled through the nave like a poisonous wind. I walked to a middle pew and sat. I didn't kneel. I didn't pray. The priest, a young man named Father Paul, whom I remembered from the wedding, spoke of the peace of the righteous of family, of the comfort of faith. His words sounded hollow, like a poorly learned script. It was at the end of the Mass, as people began to file out toward the cemetery, that it happened. Claire turned. Her gaze, dry now and glinting with hatred, found me in the crowd. Pointing a trembling finger at me, her shrill voice cut through the respectful silence. "You. It's your fault." Everyone stopped. The entire church went still. "You came to my home. You ruined our peace. You killed my mother with your poison." A collective gasp went through the church. Chloe squeezed my arm. "Claire, please, this isn't the time," Ethan said, placing a hand on her shoulder, but his voice lacked conviction. "It is the time," she shrieked, shaking off his hand. She faced me, taking a few steps forward, her veil askew, revealing bloodshot eyes. She and her monster child killed my mother with their scandal, with their lies. You're a murderer, Alara. Father Paul stepped between us, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Ma'am, please, in the house of God. Your mother is resting. Do not disturb her peace. Peace. Claire laughed a dry, horrible sound. What peace can she have with the person who killed her standing in her church? Get out of here. It was then that Robert, her husband, approached. Always a muted man, a shadow next to his wife's scorching sun. He smelled of brandy despite the hour. His suit was too big for him, as if he'd lost weight suddenly. He put a clumsy hand on Claire's arm. Honey, that's enough. People are watching. Let them watch, she wailed, turning on him. Let everyone know what she is. A witch who came to destroy my family. Robert looked at her, and for the first time I saw something other than submission in his eyes. I saw weariness, a deep, ancient anger. Claire! For God's sake, haven't you done enough with the little girl? And now this. Claire froze. What do you mean? She whispered, her voice dangerously low. Robert, fueled by alcohol and the tension of the moment, let his tongue slip. Enough with the theatrics. Your mother's heart was shot, and you never stopped giving her hell with your dramas, your jealousy. Like with the kid, as if you didn't already have the damn coffee pot in your hand when they came in. The silence was absolute. A dead silence. Robert realized what he'd said. He turned pale. Claire looked at him as if seeing him for the first time, and she didn't like what she saw. What? What did you just say? Ethan asked, stepping forward, his gaze jumping from Robert to Claire. Nothing, Robert mumbled, looking down. I said nothing. I'm upset. But it was too late. As if you didn't already have the damn coffee pot in your hand. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip. She already had it. She was ready. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. Without thinking, almost on instinct, I reached into my coat pocket. My phone. I pulled it out discreetly, the screen facing my body. With my thumb, I blindly found the voice recorder app. I opened it. I pressed record. The small red light was invisible to everyone but me. Robert, shut up, Claire hissed, regaining her composure. A mask of theatrical grief returned to her face. You're drunk and you're talking nonsense. Mom died of a broken heart. The heartbreak she caused us. She pointed at me again. The priest was trying to calm things down, leading Robert away by the arm. People were murmuring, confused. But my gaze was fixed on Claire, and for an instant hers locked on mine. And in her eyes there was no grief. There was pure hatred, and also a flicker of fear. She had heard her husband. She had seen my expression. Ethan was still staring at Robert, frowning, processing. Then his gaze shifted to me. He saw the phone in my hand. He saw my thumb near the screen. He saw the concentration on my face. He moved with a speed I didn't know he possessed. In 2 strides, he was beside me. His large, strong hand closed like a claw around my wrist. What are you doing? He growled, his voice low but full of menace. Let go of me, Ethan. Are you recording? At my mother's funeral, his voice rose. A few heads turned. Give me that. No, I tried to pull away, but he was stronger. Chloe stepped in. Let her go, you're hurting her. Ethan shoved her aside. With his other hand, he ripped the phone from my fingers. He held it up, looking at the screen. He saw the red recording light. His face twisted into a mask of rage. Bitch, he spat. And then, with all his hatred, all his frustration, he hurled my phone onto the marble floor of the church. The impact was sharp, cruel. The case shattered. The screen exploded into a spiderweb of black cracks. The little red light went out. The sound of the crash echoed under the vaulted ceiling. Everyone fell silent. Even Claire stopped crying. Ethan was breathing heavily, looking at the wreckage at his feet. Then, he looked at me. This is over, Alara. For real. I don't ever want to see you, or that child, ever again. He turned and went back to his father's side, putting an arm around his shoulders. The show was over. The prodigal son had chosen his side definitively. Chloe bent down and picked up the pieces of the phone. She took my arm. Let's get out of here, she murmured. We walked down the center aisle under the gaze of 100 eyes. I felt tears of rage and humiliation burning my eyelids, but I didn't let them fall. As we passed Robert, who was standing aside in shame, his head bowed, I paused for a second. I looked at him. He met my gaze. In his eyes, I saw fear, yes, but I also saw something else, a deep, bitter regret. And knowledge. He knew. He knew the truth. I said nothing. I kept walking. Outside, the cold afternoon air hit my face. My proof was in pieces in Chloe's hand. But I had gotten something. I had a witness. A witness who, drunk and scared, had let the truth slip in front of half the world. And most importantly, I now knew without a shadow of a doubt that it had been premeditated. Claire had heated the coffee. She had waited for her moment. The war, I thought as I got into Chloe's car, had entered a new phase. And I had just won my first fragile trophy confirmation. Sylvia Adler's office smelled of strong coffee and legal files. The walls were lined with shelves groaning under the weight of law books with worn spines. Sylvia, a woman in her 50s with silver hair in a perfect bun and reading glasses perched on her nose, was scanning a dossier. Her gaze was quick, intelligent like a hawk's. David, my family's lawyer, had recommended her. She's a shark, a good one. You need a shark. Your case, Ilara, is complicated, she said, finally setting the dossier on her oak desk. But not hopeless. Let's take it piece by piece. First, custody of Lily. Given the circumstances, the assault suffered in the paternal home with the father as a passive witness, and his subsequent attitude, it's very likely we'll get you sole custody. No judge will hand a child over to an environment where she suffered serious physical harm and the other parent did nothing to prevent it. That's a slam dunk. A slam dunk, I asked, a thread of hope weaving through me. I'd spent a week sleeping in, fits the image of the coffee pot replaying in my dreams. Compared to the other part, yes, Sylvia clarified, taking off her glasses. The problem is proving your sister-in-law's intent, so the act goes from reckless endangerment to something more like aggravated assault. We need solid proof. Robert's testimony at the funeral is juicy, but it's the word of a drunk, grieving man against a woman who will present herself in court as a devastated mother and daughter. And your phone with the recording is in a landfill. But he said it. A lot of people heard it. And he'll deny it. He already has. Sylvia pulled a sheet from a folder. I spoke with a contact. Robert went to the police station a few hours later to say his words were taken out of context, that he was distraught with grief. Without a recording, it's his word against yours. And unfortunately, in these cases, the testimony of the indirect victim, which is you, needs corroboration. I sank into my chair. Rage, my new companion, bubbled in my chest. So that's it. Claire gets away with it. I didn't say that, Sylvia replied, with a cold smile. We're working on several fronts, but we need more. Character witnesses, prior incidents, anything that paints a pattern. In the meantime, we've filed for the separation. And here comes the second part, the finances. Ethan emptying the joint accounts is a clear case of bad faith. The judge will not look kindly on it. We're going to ask for child support for Lily commensurate with his income and alimony for you. You left your job to care for the child. Your earning capacity is diminished, and with the medical and psychological expenses to come, your daughter has suffered a severe trauma, Ilara. It's not just the scar. She will eventually need help, and that costs money. Money he is going to pay. Her tone was implacable, comforting in its harshness. I've requested an emergency motion to have the funds restored and to freeze their ability to dispose of marital assets. The preliminary hearing is next week. He and his lawyer will have to sit there. And so will you. The thought of seeing him again, of sitting at the same table, made my stomach turn. And if he doesn't come, he'll come. He has too much to lose. Sylvia leaned back in her chair. Now a word of advice. Have you thought about what you're going to do? Work, housing. I'm staying at my parents' for now, and I need to find something, anything. Good. Show initiative. The judge likes that. She put her glasses back on. The appointment is Thursday at 11 a.m. at the family court on Center Street. Don't be late. And dress seriously but not weak. Strong. I left her office with my head full of legal articles and a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The legal battle was another kind of beast, slow and full of technicalities, but at least now I had someone in my corner who knew how to fight. On Thursday, the courthouse was a hive of people with long faces and files under their arms. I arrived 10 minutes early with Sylvia. She was impeccable in a gray pantsuit. I had put on a simple black dress, my hair pulled back. Strong, not weak. The hearing room was smaller than I imagined, dark wood and the smell of dust. Ethan was already there, sitting at a table. He wasn't alone. Beside him, in addition to a man in a suit with a bored expression, who I assumed was his lawyer, was Claudia. Claudia from accounting, my partner in quick breakfasts and complaints about the boss, the one who always asked about Lily with a sweet smile. She was holding Ethan's hand. The world stopped for a moment. Sylvia gently touched my elbow. Stay calm. Don't give them the satisfaction. I walked to our table across from them. Ethan didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Claudia, however, shot me a quick glance, a mix of shame and defiance, before looking down. She was wearing a necklace I had pointed out to her in a shop window. A gift from Ethan, I presumed. The judge, a middle-aged man who looked thoroughly fed up, entered, and we all stood. The hearing was an exchange of dry phrases. Ethan's lawyer, a guy named Bermudez, spoke of marital difficulties, exaggeration of unfortunate incidents, and the financial stability my client can provide. Sylvia was a whip. She cited statutes, mentioned indirect domestic violence, abandonment of parental responsibility, and proven risk to the minor. The word burn echoed several times in the small room. The judge took notes impassive. Then he spoke. He granted the temporary order on their assets. He ordered Ethan to deposit a provisional amount into an account for the child's expenses. He set a temporary child support payment. All very technical, very cold. Ethan nodded, his gaze lost on a point on the wall. It was when we were leaving in the gray, noisy hallway that Ethan approached. Claudia stayed a step behind a faithful shadow. "You got what you wanted," he said without preamble. "I want justice, Ethan. This isn't justice, it's paperwork. I don't want any more fights," he continued, ignoring my comment. "I'm going to file for an uncontested divorce. Be reasonable. If not, it will be contested and it will be long and expensive for both of us." "Don't threaten me," I said, keeping my voice low. "You have nothing left to threaten me with." It was then that Claudia, perhaps wanting to be useful, perhaps wanting to mark her territory, stepped in. She opened her expensive designer handbag to look for a tissue, and as she did, something slipped out and fell to the floor. Several papers held with a clip scattered at my feet. Before she could react, I'd already seen them. They weren't receipts. It was a medical report. I recognized the letterhead from Lenox Hill Hospital and the name Lily Hayes. And below it, a preliminary psychological report with a seal I didn't recognize. "What is that?" I asked, my blood running cold. "Why do you have my daughter's report?" Claudia turned beet red. She scrambled to pick up the papers. It's a copy. Ethan gave it to me to understand the situation. To understand the situation, I repeated each word laced with ice. I looked at Ethan. He was avoiding my gaze. "Medical reports are confidential. Only parents and doctors have them." "How did you get these?" "I have my contacts," Ethan muttered, defiant. "I want to be kept in the loop on everything related to my daughter." "This isn't being kept in the loop. This is spying." Sylvia, who had been observing the scene, intervened. "Obtaining copies of medical records without the consent of the other custodial parent, especially during a separation proceeding, is a serious invasion of privacy and a potential HIPAA violation. It plays very badly for your client, Bermudez." Ethan's lawyer rolled his eyes as if Claudia were an unforeseen nuisance. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding." But I wasn't listening anymore. I was looking at Claudia, who was hiding the papers in her purse as if they were explosives. And then a connection clicked in my mind, clear and terrible. Claudia worked in the same hospital group as Lenox Hill. In administration. She had access, or knew someone who did. It wasn't Ethan. It was her. She got the reports. She was the mole. "Let's go, Alara," Sylvia said, taking my arm firmly. "We have a lot to talk about." Leaving the courthouse, the sunlight hit my face. I felt no warmth. I felt a penetrating cold. I wasn't just fighting my husband and his family. There was an infiltrator. Someone from my own circle, someone I had trusted, was feeding them information. Private information about my daughter. We got into Sylvia's car. Before starting the engine, she looked at me. "Who is that woman, Claudia?" "A co-worker." Or she was. I took a deep breath. She got those reports. It has to be her. Sylvia nodded slowly. A cold, almost cruel smile formed on her lips. "Good. This changes things. A source in the hospital, a violation of data privacy laws. This isn't just a separation case anymore. This is dirty. And they've been good at playing dirty. From now on, so are we." I looked out the window, the city rushing by. The fear was transforming into something else. Cold determination. I had a new objective now. Not just to win. I had to find out how far Ethan's network extended. And I had to destroy it, piece by piece. Claudia was just the beginning. Sylvia's office was becoming familiar. The smell of coffee and old paper now smelled of gunpowder. My father Mike sat across from the lawyer, his large hands calloused from his work in construction resting on his knees. Chloe beside me tapped her fingers restlessly on her thigh. The energy in the room was electric conspiratorial. We have several lines of attack, Sylvia was saying, pointing with her pen to a diagram she had drawn on a legal pad. But we need solid proof. Testimonies. The university rumor is a good starting point, but it's just air. We need something tangible. Something that paints Claire not as a woman who had a fit of anger, but as what she is, a violent, calculating person. My dad has something, I said, looking at Mike. He nodded, his seriousness heralding a storm. I've been asking around carefully. Through old contacts, people who know people. Robert, the husband, isn't happy. He's a mess. He gets a good salary at his father-in-law's company, but he's a puppet. And he's drinking. Drinking a lot since the funeral. Since he ran his mouth. He paused. And I heard something else. About the nursing home. Vista Gardens. Chloe leaned forward. The senior living facility where Claire is supposedly the activities director. The one she puts on her LinkedIn profile. Committed to the well-being of the elderly. That's the one my father confirmed. A friend of a friend has his mother there. It's not the most expensive place, but it's not cheap. And he says the staff, the low-level ones, the aides and cleaners, they whisper. They talk about the activities director having a terrible temper, that she's cruel to the more dependent residents, that she humiliates them. There's one aide, a woman named Rosa, that Claire has it in for especially, makes her stay late without pay, ridicules her in front of the families. The rumor is Rosa is at her wit's end, but she has a sick daughter and needs the job. She can't just leave. Sylvia took notes with an expression of pure concentration. A disgruntled employee with reason to hate her. That's a potential witness. But we need her to talk, and we need more than rumors of a bad temper. We need an incident. Something concrete. We could try to approach her, Chloe suggested. Alara can't, she'd be recognized. But I could, or you, Mike. We could go in asking about a spot for an elderly relative, something like that, and feel things out. I'll handle it, Mike said, leaving no room for argument. I know how to talk to people who work for a living. I'll be careful. Good, Sylvia nodded. Meanwhile, there's another line. Ethan. His company. She looked at my father again. Mike's face broke into a smile that had no joy in it. It was the smile of a man who has found the missing piece. Arthur's company, Northeast Construction Incorporated. It's been sailing under a pirate flag for years. Tax evasion, fake invoices to shell companies, shady public works contracts. I have a contact at the IRS, a guy who owes me a favor. I've been feeding him some numbers, some transactions that never added up. He's interested. If they start pulling on that thread, Ethan, as the CFO, is going to have a very bad time. And so will his father. That's a nuclear option, Mike, Sylvia warned, though her eyes were gleaming. If we use it wrong, it will look like revenge and hurt Ilara's case. It has to come up naturally as part of a routine investigation. And it has to happen after we secure custody and deal with Claire. First, we secure the child and discredit the attacker. Then, if necessary, we release the IRS hounds. Understood, Mike said. But the hounds are already sniffing. I stared at Sylvia's diagram, the lines connecting Claire, Ethan, the nursing home, the IRS. It was a plan, a battle plan. We were no longer reacting. We were attacking. There's one more thing I can do, I said, and all eyes turned to me. Something public. Something they can't deny. The Church of Street. Francis, on the Upper East Side, was where Claire, according to Chloe, who had followed her for a couple of days, attended the 12 o'clock Mass on Sundays to be seen, my cousin had said with disdain. She goes in her designer suits and kneels in the front pew. The following Sunday I was there too. Not inside. Outside with Lily in my arms. We had been to the plastic surgeon a few days before. The last of the bandages had been removed. Now the scar was visible, a pink, still shiny mark running from her temple to her jaw across her cheekbone. A brutal reminder. The doctor said with time it would fade, turn whitish, but it would always be there. We had to apply cream, constantly massage it. And Lily, poor thing, would touch her face, confused by the new texture. That day, Lily wore a pretty light blue dress and a ribbon in her hair. No hat. Nothing to hide her left profile. I stood by the main exit. When the congregation began to file out, I saw her. Claire, in a beige suit and high heels, was chatting with another similar-looking woman, laughing affectedly. Sophia, in a matching dress, was pulling on her hand, bored. I took a deep breath, and then deliberately, I took a few steps forward, putting myself in her line of sight. I held Lily, facing the crowd. Claire looked up. Her smile froze. Her eyes met mine, and then they dropped inevitably to Lily's face. To the scar. I saw her own face pale beneath her makeup. I saw her red-painted lips part slightly. It wasn't fear. It was dread. The dread of having her work seen by all. The woman she was talking to followed her gaze. She saw Lily. Her eyes widened in horror. "Oh my God, you poor thing. What happened to that child?" Claire didn't answer. She was still paralyzed, rooted to the spot, staring at the mark as if it were a ghost. It was then that Lily, perhaps sensing the tension, perhaps just bored, turned a little more toward the people. The morning light illuminated the scar in all its glory. The contrast between her peachy skin and the pink, still-raised mark was stark. A whisper went through the small group exiting the church. Glances of pity, of morbid curiosity were fixed on my daughter's face. And then some of those intrigued looks shifted to Claire, who was still standing there pale as death, unable to move a muscle. "Let's go, Claire, honey," her friend said, pulling her arm uncomfortable. Claire blinked as if coming out of a trance. She shot me a look. In her eyes there was no longer dread. There was pure hatred, a hatred that promised revenge. But this time the hatred was mixed with something new. Panic. The panic of being exposed of her secret, her crime being on display for all to see, carved into the flesh of an innocent child. Without a word, she spun on her heels and walked away, almost running, dragging a protesting Sophia with her. I stood there holding Lily, stroking her back. I didn't feel triumph. I felt disgust and a deep sadness. But I also felt it was necessary. The world had to see. The world had to know. 2 days later, my father came home with news. He sat at the kitchen table, accepted the glass of wine my mother offered him, and looked at Chloe and me. I spoke with Rosa the aide, and I asked, holding my breath. "She's young, has a 4-year-old girl with cystic fibrosis. The treatments are expensive. Claire has her on a tight leash, exploits her, makes her work unpaid overtime, yells at her, humiliates her in front of the residents. But that's not the worst of it." Mike took a sip of wine. "A few months ago, there was an incident with an old woman, Mrs. Elvira, very dependent with advanced dementia. Mrs. Elvira, in a moment of confusion, wet herself in her chair during one of Claire's directed activities. Instead of calling an aide, Claire, in front of 5 other residents, screamed at her, called her a disgusting pig, and she cleaned her roughly, brusquely leaving bruises on her arms. Rosa walked in and saw it. Claire threatened her. "If you say one word, you're not just fired. I'll make sure you never work in this town again. And goodbye to health insurance for your daughter." "Dear God," my mother murmured. "Rosa recorded it," my father continued, a spark of satisfaction in his eyes. "Not all of it, but part of it. The screaming, the insults. And then, after Claire left, Rosa, shaking, took pictures of Mrs. Elvira's bruises with her phone. The old woman died a few weeks later of natural causes. She has a recording," I said, almost voiceless. "And photos, she has them. She guards them like a treasure of hatred. Out of fear, but also out of rage." Mike looked at us. I offered her a deal. Sylvia can get her a beast of a labor lawyer to build a harassment and wrongful termination case that will get her a fat settlement. We'll cover the costs. I also told her we can advance her money if she needs it for her daughter's treatments. No strings attached. It's not a bribe, it's help. In exchange, she testifies against Claire and gives us the recording and the photos. "Did she accept?" Chloe asked. "No. She's still scared. Very scared. But I saw the hatred in her eyes. Hatred is stronger than fear. I think she'll do it. She just needs a little more pressure. The good kind." "What pressure?" I asked. "Her daughter needs a new experimental treatment, not covered by insurance. It costs $20,000. I told her if she cooperates, the money will be in her account in 24 hours. Mike set down his glass. "It's a fortune, I know. But it's what's left from the sale of the business. Your mother and I agree. This is what it's for. To make that witch pay." Tears blurred my vision. I said nothing. I just took my father's hand. That big, rough hand. He squeezed it hard. "We're not on the defensive anymore, honey," he said in a low voice. "Now we go for the kill." The air in Criminal Courtroom Part 5 smelled of waxed wood and anxiety. I clung to my father Mike's hand while the prosecutor, a thin woman with sharp features named Vega, delivered her closing argument. On the other side, Claire, in a suit too severe for her, feigned a composure that was cracking around her eyes. Her lawyer, a man with thin-rimmed glasses, spoke of a tragic domestic accident, a moment of panic, a family destroyed by misunderstandings. Lily wasn't there. She was at home with my mother, Helen. I couldn't expose her to this, but her absence weighed more heavily than any presence. The scar on my own cheek, now a pink, sensitive line, seemed to burn under my makeup. It was my parallel mark to hers, a reminder I had chosen not to hide. The judge, a man with a tired face, listened, taking brief notes. We had spent months here. Testimony from me. From the in-laws, Arthur Stoic, defending his daughter. Meredith from beyond the grave invoked as a martyr. From Ethan, my ex-husband. The words still sounded strange. He had testified a week earlier. He supported the accident version, but hesitantly, evasively. He didn't look at Claire. He didn't look at me. He looked into the void and spoke of family tensions and misunderstandings. His betrayal no longer hurt. It just produced disgust. Your Honor, Claire's lawyer concluded in a honeyed voice, my client is an exemplary mother, a respected professional at her senior center, and a woman shattered by what occurred. To criminalize a sad mistake made in the heat of a family argument would be to destroy yet another life. I ask for an acquittal. Prosecutor Vega stood. Your Honor, there was no mistake. There was intent. The temperature of the liquid, the proximity, the act of pouring, not dropping it, all points to a deliberate action. The minor Lily Hayes will be scarred for life. This is not an accident. This is violence. And I ask that the defendant be found guilty of felony assault. The judge nodded pensive. The case was complex. No direct witnesses other than me, and my testimony was to the defense that of a resentful ex-wife. It came down to her word against mine. My father's investigation into Claire at the nursing home had cast shadows but yielded nothing conclusive. Ethan's tax troubles were a weapon for the separation, not for this. I felt hope a fragile bubble begin to deflate. Claire sensed it. A nearly imperceptible smirk, a spark of triumph crossed her eyes as they met mine. It was then that the back door of the courtroom opened quietly. Rosa, the former aide from the nursing home, entered. She was dressed in black, looking even more timid than usual. Claire saw her and frowned, confused. Rosa had not been subpoenaed. Her lawyer shrugged, clueless. Prosecutor Vega, however, straightened up. Your Honor, with your permission, I wish to present a new piece of documentary evidence. New information has come to light. The judge nodded with a weary sigh. Quickly, please. Rosa, without looking at Claire, approached the prosecutor's table and handed over a small thumb drive. The prosecutor inserted it into a laptop connected to a monitor. The large screen in the courtroom lit up. What is this circus? The defense lawyer protested. Silence, the judge ordered. On the screen, a shaky homemade video appeared, recorded on a phone. It was the living room of my in-laws' apartment. Claire was visible, a glass of wine in her hand, talking to a friend whose face was off camera. A hidden camera was recording her from the side. It was Rosa recording. Weeks after the incident, following the instructions Chloe and I had given her with the promise of helping her and her family start over far away. And the little bitch dared to press charges, Claire was saying in the video, with a drunken, contemptuous smile, over a little splash of coffee. Such an exaggeration. The kid is just like her mother, a pest. She had to learn. In my house, nobody touches what belongs to Sophia. Nobody. Especially not that spoiled brat. The next time she gets near what isn't hers, I'll scald her for real. A lesson she won't forget. The blood drained from my face. The courtroom erupted in a low murmur. Claire shot to her feet, white as the wall. It's a lie. That video is doctored. That tramp set me up, she screamed, pointing at Rosa, who lowered her head. Objection, Your Honor, her lawyer bellowed. Overruled, the judge said in a voice of thunder. His eyes were glued to the screen where Claire was laughing, cruel and uninhibited. The next time, she wasn't talking about an accident. She was talking about a lesson, a warning about intent. The video ended. The silence was absolute. Prosecutor Vega broke it. This video, lawfully obtained by a third party in a private but common space, shows the defendant's true attitude. There is no remorse. There is intent and the threat of reoffense. The accident defense is untenable. The judge looked at Claire. She was trembling. The mask had shattered, revealing the raw hatred and panic beneath. Miss Hayes, the judge said, using her married name. Do you have anything to add? Claire opened her mouth, but only a gasp came out. She looked around, searching for her father. Arthur stared straight ahead, petrified. She searched for Ethan. My ex-husband wasn't in the courtroom. He had left after testifying. He had chosen his side, his reputation over his sister at the decisive moment. The verdict wasn't delivered then. The judge, after a brief recess, adjourned. But the blow was immediate. The prosecutor requested and the judge granted a preventive suspension of Claire's visitation rights with Sophia pending an evaluation by social services. And most importantly, he admitted the video as evidence. The case was no longer her word against mine. It was her own recorded arrogance against her. I left the courtroom with my father and David the lawyer. My legs felt like jelly, but a strange calm was washing over me. Not joy. Something deeper. Justice. In the hallway, Ethan was waiting for us. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Elara," he said, his voice hoarse. My father stepped between us, but I put a hand on his arm. "What is it, my lawyer?" He showed me the papers your lawyer filed. The IRS stuff. He swallowed hard. "If I don't withdraw my request for joint custody, and if I don't support your version of events from now on, they'll make it public. They'll ruin my father's company." I looked at him. There was no trace of the arrogant man who had screamed at me in the hospital. There was only a scared man defeated by his own miserable choices. And I asked coldly. "I'll sign," he said, the words dragged out. "I'll renounce custody. Everything. You'll have full custody. And I'll testify that maybe Claire wasn't entirely right. That there was negligence. Negligence, not intent. Still protecting her halfway. But it was enough. It was surrender. He would sign the papers. Lily would be mine alone. Send them to David," I said, turning my back on him. "Elara, for what we were," he started. I didn't turn around. "We weren't anything, Ethan. Absolutely nothing. We left the courthouse. The daylight hit my face." I took a deep breath. My father squeezed my shoulder. "This is the beginning of the end, honey." We walked toward the parking garage. I was a few steps ahead, lost in a whirlwind of emotions, relief, emptiness, and immense sadness. I didn't see the car until it was too late. A roar of an engine, a flash of metal, a shout from my father. A massive, sharp impact to my side. The world spun. The sky swapped places with the asphalt. A sharp white pain exploded in my hip and my leg. I heard screams, screeching tires, the sound of breaking glass. From the ground I saw the car, a black BMW. And through the windshield, the contorted face, the bloodshot eyes of Claire. She looked at me for an instant with an expression of pure hatred, and then she slammed on the accelerator. The car fishtailed and shot down the street, weaving through traffic until it was lost. "Elara, honey." It was my father's ragged voice. I tried to move. A searing pain in my left leg stopped me. People were crowding around. Sirens, distant at first, grew closer. Before the darkness pulled me under, my last thought wasn't of myself. It was of Lily. And that Claire had finally made her ultimate mistake. In broad daylight. In front of dozens of witnesses. The recovery was a tunnel of pain, plaster, and cold rage. The fractured femur kept me in bed for 2 months and on crutches for another 4. But every twinge, every exhausting physical therapy session was a reminder I was alive. And she was caught. The hit and run was the final nail in Claire's coffin. They caught her 3 hours later, hiding in a roadside motel, drunk and sobbing. There was no bail this time. Attempted murder. Fleeing the scene. A public menace. The media had a field day. The perfect sister-in-law who burned her niece and then tried to kill her former in-law. Her picture, hair disheveled, eyes crazed, was in all the papers. The nursing home where she worked fired her immediately. Arthur, my ex-father-in-law, fell apart. He tried to hire expensive lawyers, but the evidence was overwhelming. The video, the hit and run, the witnesses. The exemplary family shattered in public. While I was learning to walk again, the papers for Lily's full custody arrived, signed by a defeated Ethan. He renounced everything in exchange for my father not making his company's murky tax affairs public. His business was saved by a thread, but his reputation in our circle was in tatters. He went to live, I later heard, in a house in the suburbs with Claudia, my former coworker. The betrayal no longer mattered. They were ghosts, from a world that had ceased to exist. Lily was my engine. Her scar, thanks to the treatments and her youth, was softening, becoming a pale line. She learned not to hide it. Sometimes, looking in the mirror, she'd trace it with a little finger, thoughtful. I told her in simple words that it was a mark of how strong she was, of how much she had overcome. Like warrior princesses, I would say, and she would nod seriously. A year after the trial, the air in New York still tasted of ash and furtive glances. Despite the legal victory, the city was a graveyard of bad memories. One afternoon, looking at the ocean on my computer screen, I said, "Dad, Mom, we have to leave." My parents, who had supported me every step of the way, didn't hesitate. Mike sold his remaining shares in the business. Helen closed her small embroidery shop. We closed the chapter. A quiet town in Northern California received us with a forgiving sun and a salty breeze that cleansed the soul. We rented a white house with blue shutters near the harbor. Life slowed down. Time was measured in walks along the pier, in almond ice cream in Lily's first days of school, where she was just another dark-haired, smiling kid. The scar under the island sun seemed to melt a little more into her skin each day. I found a job in the office of a shipping company far from the world of lawyers and courtrooms. It was a simple job, didn't pay much, but it allowed me to pick Lily up from school every day. In the afternoons, I sometimes helped my mother in a small sewing workshop she'd set up for tourists. I sewed curtains, mended dresses. Stitch by stitch, I was mending my life. One late summer evening, the sky stained orange. Lily and my parents had stayed home to bake a cake. I felt like walking. I went down to the harbor where the fishing boats bobbed and tourists were starting to find tables for dinner. I sat on the terrace of a small bar and ordered a glass of white wine. I watched the lights reflect on the water, feeling for the first time in years a peace that wasn't just the absence of war, but something positive, warm. Alara. The voice behind me was a shock. It was deep, tired. I turned. It was Robert Claire's husband. He looked like a ghost of the person I remembered. He'd aged a decade. His clothes were a little loose, and his eyes no longer held that complicit indifference, but a deep sadness. "Robert," I said, not knowing what else to add. I didn't feel fear or anger, just a distant curiosity. "May I?" He gestured to the empty chair. I nodded curtly. He sat down heavily. He didn't order anything. For a moment, he just looked at the sea. "You look well," he murmured. Not as a question, but as a statement. "Lily, too. I saw her the other day with your parents. She's radiant." "Yes," I replied, guarded. "What did he want?" "I moved here," he said, as if reading my mind. "A few months ago. After everything. I lost my job in New York. Everyone knew. Here nobody knows anything." He paused. "Sophia is with my parents in Chicago. She doesn't want anything to do with her mother. Or with me." I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel sorry for him. He had been an accomplice with his silence. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued, looking at his hands. "I'm not even here to ask for it. I came because I need to tell someone. And you're the only one who can understand." I looked up, expectant. "The coffee." "It wasn't the first time," he whispered so low, the wind almost carried it away. "With Sophia. When she was little and would throw a tantrum. Claire would sometimes. She'd grip her too hard. Leave marks on her arms. She'd say she fell. I saw it, but I looked the other way, like with everything." His voice broke. "And with your daughter Alara. That morning before you arrived, Claire put the espresso pot on the stove. And she said, while she was watching it boil, she said, 'Today I'm going to teach that little brat not to stick her hands where they don't belong.' I thought it was a bad joke. One of her exaggerations. But it wasn't, was it? The air froze in my lungs. I knew it, of course, but to hear it confirmed by someone who was there, by the man who shared her bed, was different. It was more real, more monstrous. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Because she's not here to kill me with a look," he said with a hint of bitter humor. "And because Sophia deserves to know someday that her father at least once had the courage to tell the truth, even if it was too late. It might not do you any good, but for me, it's like taking a rock out of my shoe after years of walking on it." We sat in silence. The waiter put another glass of wine on my table without asking. Robert kept talking, his gaze lost on the horizon. He told me more things, of veiled threats to neighbors, of cruelty to animals, of a sick obsession with control, and with humiliating those she considered beneath her. A portrait of a woman consumed by envy and malice long before I ever entered the picture. It wasn't an explanation. It was a confession. When he stood to leave, he looked even more tired. "I won't bother you again," he said. "But thank you for listening." He walked away down the pier, hunched over until he blended into the evening shadows. I stayed there, watching the lights of the boats. I didn't feel relief or victory. I felt a different kind of weight, the weight of knowing the monster was real, and that it had lived among us, fed by everyone's silence. But I also felt something else. My daughter's scar under the light of the rising moon was no longer just a mark of pain. It was proof that we had survived, that we had escaped, and that here on this coast, washed by the sea, we could finally begin to heal. I raised my glass in a silent toast. Not to the past, to the future. And a future that for the first time felt truly our own.